James Carter never believed in ghosts. He was a man of science, a technician who fixed broken things and kept the colony running. But lately, strange things have been happening. Tools disappeared from his workbench. Doors opened and closed on their own. At first, he thought it was just a malfunction in the colony's automated systems, but then he started noticing patterns. It wasn't just random. Someone, or something, was moving through the colony unseen. The human settlement on Vega 3 was small, home to a few hundred people. It was a quiet, peaceful place, built on an alien world rich in resources. James liked it here. But now he felt like he was being watched. One night, while repairing a power relay in an empty corridor, he felt it again. That odd sensation, like the air itself had weight. A chill ran down his spine. His instincts screamed at him. Someone was standing nearby. James turned sharply, pretending to check his tools while keeping his ears sharp. The corridor was empty. He exhaled. Maybe he was imagining things. But then, a whisper. Not a human voice, a soft, alien sound. James spun around, his heart pounding. He reached out blindly, as if trying to catch something that wasn't there. And then, his fingers brushed against something solid, something warm. For a split second, James felt a shoulder, a shape, a person. But then his hand passed through empty air. His breath caught in his throat. "What the hell?" he muttered, stepping back. His heart pounded like a drum. He had felt something. Someone. A presence that shouldn't exist. James wasn't alone. Valera froze. The human had touched her. For months, she had moved through this colony unnoticed, using the cloaking field built into her suit. She was a scout, sent to observe humans and gather intelligence for her people. They feared humans, believed they were dangerous, unpredictable. Her mission was simple: watch, learn, and report back. And until tonight, she had been invisible. But now, he had felt her. Valera's mind raced. How? No human had ever detected her before. Was her suit malfunctioning? That shouldn't be possible. But when the human reached out again, her cloaking field flickered, just for a heartbeat. She panicked. If he touched her again, the field might fail completely. She had to leave. Now, she stepped backward, trying to move silently. But the human was sharp, too sharp. He grabbed a small tool from his belt and pressed a button. A scanning pulse flashed through the corridor. Valera's vision blurred for half a second. Then she heard it, a warning beep inside her helmet. Her suit was failing. The human's eyes widened. He saw it too. For the briefest moment, her outline shimmered into existence. James didn't know what he was seeing. His mind struggled to make sense of it. A flicker in the air, like light bending around a shape. And then, a glimpse of something else. A figure. A person. He took a slow step forward, his breath caught in his chest. "Who's there?" he asked, his voice steady. Silence. He knew someone was there. He had felt them, seen them, even if only for a moment. "Listen," he said carefully, keeping his hands at his sides. "I'm not going to hurt you. Just show yourself." Nothing. James exhaled. Whoever it was, they didn't want to be seen. But he wasn't giving up. His mind raced with possibilities. Was this an advanced human experiment? Some kind of tech failure? Or was it something else? Something alien? A chill ran through him. Humanity wasn't alone in the galaxy. Everyone knew that. But Vega 3 was supposed to be an uninhabited world. If something was here, living among them without their knowledge, he had to find out the truth. Valera's pulse was racing. An alien. A real, living alien. Valera froze, staring at the human in front of her. He wasn't reaching for a weapon. He wasn't calling for help. He was just staring. "You're real," James whispered. Valera swallowed hard. This was bad. She had broken protocol. No human was supposed to see her. But it was too late now. For a long moment, neither of them moved. James finally broke the silence. "Who are you?" Valera hesitated. She had been trained for situations like this. If discovered, never reveal information, never engage, and never trust a human. But James had already touched her, seen her, and tracked her. Running was no longer an option. "My name is Valera," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I am a scout from the Zyran Dominion. I was sent here to observe." James narrowed his eyes. "Observe? Why?" Valera hesitated again. "To determine if humans are a threat." James let out a short laugh. "A threat? We didn't even know you were here." "That's exactly why my people are afraid of you," Valera admitted. "You are unpredictable. You expand, you adapt, and you survive in places where others would fail." James crossed his arms. "So what now? Are you going to erase my memory or something?" Valera bit her lip. I don't know." James studied her carefully. She wasn't acting like an enemy. If anything, she seemed just as uncertain as he was. But then, a loud alarm echoed through the corridor. Valera's blood ran cold. Her people had arrived. James turned toward the sound, his instincts screaming at him. Something wasn't right. "What is that?" he asked. Valera's voice was tense. "You need to run." James frowned. "What? Why?" She stepped closer, her expression serious. "My people won't let you leave with this knowledge. If they see you, they will make sure you forget this, or worse." James's heart pounded. Worse. Valera didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed his wrist. James barely had time to react before she pulled him forward, leading him away from the approaching danger. "Come with me," she whispered urgently. "If you want to live." James didn't know if he could trust her, but he did know that he didn't want to find out what was waiting for him if he stayed. Without another word, he ran. James had no time to think. Valera's grip on his wrist was tight, her silver blue skin cool against his own. She moved fast, her long legs carrying her effortlessly through the metal corridors of the research station. James struggled to keep up, his boots thudding heavily against the floor. Behind them, the alarm continued to blare, a sharp, warning sound that sent a chill down his spine. Who had triggered it? Were her people already here? "Where are we going?" James panted, trying not to trip as Valera turned a sharp corner. "We need to get off this level," she said without looking back. "If my people find you, they won't let you leave with what you know." James gritted his teeth. "And what exactly do I know?" Valera finally glanced at him, her glowing eyes filled with uncertainty. "Too much." They reached a maintenance hatch at the end of the hallway. Valera pressed a control panel, and the hatch slid open, revealing a narrow passageway leading downward. "In here," she urged. James hesitated. The passage was dark, tight, and completely unknown. Valera noticed his hesitation. "It leads to the lower deck. There's an escape route there." "Escape?" James frowned. "You mean you're running too?" Valera exhaled sharply. "I sent a distress signal before you saw me. My people are coming to retrieve me. But if they find you, they will erase everything you've seen. By any means necessary." James's stomach tightened. "Meaning?" She didn't answer, but she didn't have to. James had worked with classified technology before. He knew what it meant to erase evidence. He wasn't about to wait and see if that meant wiping his memory or something worse. Taking a deep breath, he climbed into the passageway. Valera followed, sealing the hatch behind them. The tunnel was cramped and dark, lit only by faint emergency lights. James crawled forward, his breathing heavy. Valera moved silently behind him, her presence barely noticeable. "Your people," James whispered. "How soon before they get here?" "Minutes," Valera said. "Maybe less." James cursed under his breath. That wasn't much time. He kept moving, his mind racing. How had this even happened? 1 minute, he was doing routine maintenance, and the next, he was on the run with an invisible alien. Why are they so afraid of humans? James asked. Valera hesitated before answering. Because your kind is dangerous. James scoffed. We didn't even know you existed. Exactly, she said. And yet you've spread across the galaxy. You find a way to survive anywhere. You're unpredictable, resourceful, and stubborn. James smirked. Sounds like compliments to me. Valera's voice was softer. Maybe, but my people don't see it that way. They see a force that can't be controlled. That's why I was sent here, to watch, to study, and to make sure humans aren't a threat. James glanced back. And, what did you find out? Valera met his gaze. That I don't want to be the reason an innocent man disappears. James blinked. That wasn't the answer he expected. They reached the end of the tunnel. Valera pressed a hidden panel, and a small door slid open, revealing the dimly lit storage room. James stepped out first, scanning the area. It was quiet. No alarms, no voices. For now, they were safe. Valera stepped beside him. We're close. The emergency pods are down the next hall. James nodded. Then let's move. They turned toward the door and froze. A shadow moved beyond the entrance. Valera stiffened. They're here. James's pulse spiked. There was no way out except through that door. Valera grabbed his arm, pulling him behind a stack of crates. She tapped the side of her suit, and a faint shimmer spread over her body. Within seconds, she disappeared again. James exhaled slowly. That was still unsettling. The door slid open. James held his breath as two figures entered. They were tall, armored, and alien. Their sleek metallic suits had the same glowing lines as Valera's, but their helmets completely covered their faces. They moved carefully, scanning the room with handheld devices. One of them spoke in a deep mechanical voice. The signal came from this area. She's close. The second alien tapped his device. There's another life form detected. Human. James's grip tightened around the small tool in his pocket. They knew he was here. He needed a plan. Fast. Valera watched from her cloaked position, her mind racing. She had known this would happen. The Dominion didn't leave loose ends. They wouldn't let James go. They would take him, erase his memory, or worse, make sure he never spoke of this again. Valera clenched her fists. She couldn't let that happen. She made her decision. Stepping forward, she reached into her suit and pulled out a small silver device. Then, before she could think twice, she deactivated her cloak. The two armored aliens turned sharply, raising their weapons. Valera lifted her hands in surrender. Wait, she said quickly. One of them lowered his weapon slightly. Valera, you were ordered not to be seen. The Council will not be pleased. I know, Valera said, keeping her voice steady. But I need your help. The second alien stepped closer. You signaled for extraction. We are here to retrieve you and erase all evidence. His visor turned toward James's hiding place. Valera took a step forward. The human knows nothing important. Let him go. The first alien hesitated. That is not for us to decide. Valera gritted her teeth. Then I'll decide. She threw the silver device on the ground. A bright flash exploded through the room. The two aliens staggered back, their visors flickering. James shielded his eyes as the light faded. Valera turned to him. Run. James didn't need to be told twice. Together, they bolted through the door, straight toward the escape pods. James's heart pounded as he sprinted through the dimly lit hallway. Valera right beside him. The emergency lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows on the metallic walls. Behind them, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed. Her people were chasing them. Valera tapped a device on her wrist, and a holographic map flickered to life above her palm. We're close, she said, her voice tense. Just one more corridor, and we'll reach the escape pods. James didn't slow down. Are they all locked? Valera shook her head. No, but they'll override any unauthorized launch. James gritted his teeth. Then we better find a way to make it authorized. James felt a flicker of hope. Great. Can you activate it? The alien nodded, adjusting the controls. A faint humming filled the air as the system powered up. But then, the station trembled. Vel-Era's eyes widened. What was that? The alien's face darkened. We have a problem. A deep rumbling echoed through the walls. Dust fell from the ceiling. James's stomach clenched. What's happening? The alien moved quickly. The station has security measures. If unauthorized access is detected, it awakens. James groaned. You could have mentioned that earlier. The alien ignored him, pressing buttons rapidly. The defenses were meant to protect this place from intruders. But after centuries, they no longer recognize friend or foe. The console flashed red. Alert. Security Bureau Tokyo engaged. Suddenly, metal panels in the walls slid open, and tall robotic sentries stepped out. Their glowing eyes locked onto them. Vel-Era cursed. Here we go again. The first sentry fired a pulse of energy. James barely dodged as the beam scorched the ground where he had been standing. Run, the alien shouted. The three of them rushed through the corridors, dodging blasts from the security droids. Sparks flew as walls exploded behind them. James panted. This station really doesn't like visitors. They turned a corner and found a large reinforced door. The alien slammed a panel beside it, and the door groaned open. This way. They dashed inside just as another blast rocked the hallway. The alien sealed the door behind them. James caught his breath. Please tell me this room doesn't have more killer robots. Vel-Era scanned the space. It looks like an old hangar. James followed her gaze, and his eyes widened. At the center of the hangar sat a small spacecraft. Vel-Era's lips parted in amazement. An ancient transport. James's heart pounded. Does it work? The alien nodded. It has been dormant for centuries, but it should still fly. Vel-Era rushed to the controls. We need to power it up. Fast. James jumped into the co-pilot seat. Tell me what to do. The alien moved to a nearby panel. I will unlock the launch system. The station shook violently. The security droids were forcing their way in. James gritted his teeth. No pressure or anything. Vel-Era's fingers danced over the controls. The ship's engines roared to life. The alien activated the hangar doors. Go. Now. Vel-Era grabbed the throttle. The ship lifted off the ground, hovering above the hangar floor. James turned to the alien. What about you? Are you coming? The alien shook his head. My place is here. But take this. He tossed James a small data chip. James caught it. What is it? The alien's eyes glowed. Knowledge. Of the ancients. Use it wisely. Before James could say another word, Vel-Era punched the thrusters. The ship shot forward, racing toward the open sky. Below them, the station collapsed inward, consumed by its own failing systems. As they broke through the atmosphere, James let out a breath of relief. We made it. Vel-Era nodded. Now let's get home. James held up the data chip and figure out what secrets this holds. As the stars stretched out before them, one thing was certain. This was only the beginning. The end. The human wasn't leaving. Worse, he wasn't afraid. He was curious. This was bad. Humans were unpredictable, and this one was smart. If she made one more mistake, he would see her completely. She had to disappear before the colony found out. Carefully, she moved toward the exit. But the human was watching now, scanning the air. He was waiting for her to move. Her mind raced for a solution. If she ran, he would chase her. If she attacked, she would break the treaty her people had sworn to uphold. She had one option left. Slowly, she reached for the emergency beacon on her wrist. If she activated it, her people would come for her. She didn't want to do this. She had spent too much time among humans, seen too much. They weren't the monsters her leaders believed them to be. But now, she had no choice. She pressed the button. A silent signal was sent into the stars. And for the first time, humanity was no longer alone on Vega 3. James Carter stared at the empty corridor, his mind racing. He had seen something, someone, a shimmering outline, a presence he could feel but not fully see. It wasn't his imagination. He was sure of it. He took a deep breath and ran a hand through his short brown hair. His instincts told him one thing: this wasn't human technology. Something else was at work here. James looked around carefully, scanning for any sign of movement. The air was still, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. Whoever, or whatever, was there had managed to disappear again, but not before he caught a glimpse of them. And that changed everything. Vel-Era's heart pounded inside her chest. She had sent the distress signal. Now she had only minutes before her people responded. They would extract her, erase any evidence of her existence, and possibly even remove the human who had seen too much. She clenched her fists. She didn't want that. For months, she had lived in the shadows of this human colony, watching them, studying them. She had seen their kindness, their curiosity, and more than anything, their resilience. Humans weren't the ruthless conquerors her people feared. And this one, the one who had touched her, was different. He wasn't afraid. She had to make a decision. Did she run, or did she reveal herself? Her cloaking suit was damaged. Another pulse from his scanner would expose her fully. She had to act fast. Taking a deep breath, Vel-Era stepped back into the shadows, moving slowly, carefully. If she could just make it to the airlock, she could escape before her people arrived. But then, the human moved. James wasn't going to let this go. His heart pounded as he pulled a small tracking device from his belt. If something was in this corridor, something invisible, maybe he couldn't see it, but he could still track it. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed the device forward. It landed silently on the metal floor. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a single step. The device blinked red. James's eyes widened. There was something moving, right in front of him. "Got you," he muttered under his breath. Then he lunged. Vel-Era gasped as the human moved with unnatural speed. Before she could react, she felt his hand brush against her arm. Her cloaking field flickered violently, struggling to stay active. She twisted away, trying to escape, but it was too late. The field collapsed. James stumbled back as a figure materialized in front of him. For the first time, he saw her clearly. She was tall, slender, and undeniably alien. Her skin had a soft, silver-blue hue, and her large, luminous eyes held a mixture of shock and fear. She wore a tight, form-fitting suit with intricate glowing patterns running along her arms and legs. James's breath caught in his throat. An alien. A real, living alien. James rubbed his chin. "First, we need supplies." He turned back to the pod, pulling out whatever wasn't broken. A small survival kit, a few emergency rations, and a handheld energy scanner. Vel-Era picked up the scanner and checked it. "There's a power source nearby." James raised an eyebrow. "Like a city." Vel-Era shook her head. "Not that big, but it's artificial. Someone, or something, lives here." James's heart pounded. They weren't alone. As they moved through the jungle, the sounds of strange creatures echoed around them. Leaves rustled in the wind, and glowing insects flitted past. James kept his eyes on the scanner. "How far?" Vel-Era pointed ahead, beyond those rocks. They climbed over a pile of massive roots and reached an open clearing. James's breath caught. In the center stood a metallic structure, ancient and overgrown with vines. It looked like an abandoned research station. Vel-Era's eyes widened. "This isn't for my people. It's old. Very old." James stepped forward cautiously. The doors were slightly open. A faint blue light flickered from inside. James exchanged a glance with Valera. Should we check it out? Valera hesitated, then nodded. If there's a working transmitter inside, we can call for help. They moved toward the entrance, pushing the heavy doors open. Inside, dust and cobwebs covered the walls. Strange alien symbols were etched into the metal. Broken consoles lay scattered across the floor. James frowned. Who built this place? Valera ran her fingers over the wall markings. I don't know. A sudden noise echoed from deeper inside. James stiffened. Did you hear that? Valera's glowing eyes narrowed. She reached for her plasma knife. Then, a shadow moved. James barely had time to react before something rushed toward them from the darkness. A figure emerged, a tall alien, clad in tattered armor, its eyes burning like embers. Valera gasped. Impossible. The alien raised a weapon and pointed it at them. James slowly raised his hands. We come in peace. The alien's voice was low and sharp. You shouldn't be here. James gulped. So much for an easy rescue. James stood frozen, his hands slightly raised, staring at the tall, armored alien pointing a weapon at them. Valera, still gripping her plasma knife, took a cautious step forward. The alien's burning amber eyes flickered between them, full of suspicion. His voice was low but firm. You are trespassing. James gulped. Look, we didn't mean to. We crash-landed here. Our ship is broken, and we need help. The alien didn't lower his weapon. No one comes here. This place is forbidden. Valera's gaze sharpened. Forbidden by whom? The alien's expression darkened. By those who came before. Those who built this station. And those who died because of it. A chill ran down James's spine. Died? What happened here? The alien studied them for a moment before finally lowering his weapon. Follow me. He turned and walked deeper into the station. James exchanged a wary glance with Valera, but they followed. Inside, the station was a maze of broken corridors and flickering lights. Dust covered everything, and the walls were marked with strange symbols. The alien led them into what looked like a control room. A large, circular console sat at the center, glowing faintly. This place, the alien said, was once an outpost of the ancients, an advanced race that ruled this sector long ago. He ran a hand over the console. They built weapons beyond imagination, but in their greed for power, they destroyed themselves. Valera's eyes widened. The ancients, I thought they were just myths. The alien turned to her. They were real, and this station is all that remains of their knowledge. James frowned. Then why is it forbidden? The alien's face hardened. Because some things are too dangerous to be used again. Valera stepped closer. We don't want weapons. We just need a communication device to send a distress signal. The alien hesitated. Then he reached toward the console, pressing a few buttons. The screen flickered to life. There is an old transmitter here, he said. It may still work. The pod zipped through the swirling asteroids. For a split second, they were completely surrounded by giant spinning rocks. The gravity shifts pulled the pod in random directions, making it shake violently. James's vision blurred from the motion. But then, they were through. The moment they emerged, Valera jerked the controls hard to the left. The pod lurched sideways, ducking behind a massive asteroid. James held his breath. Would it work? Seconds later, a loud explosion shook space. James turned to see the enemy scout ship slam into an asteroid. The impact sent debris flying in all directions. James let out a breath of relief. We did it. Valera, panting, looked at the scanners. The warship was still there, but it was too far away to chase them now. Valera exhaled. We're safe. For now. James leaned back in his seat, his heart still racing. Valera turned to him, her glowing eyes searching his face. You were right, she admitted. Your instincts saved us. James smirked. Sometimes, You have to take risks. Valera gave a small smile. But then, another alarm beeped. James's smile faded. Now what? Valera checked the screen, and her expression darkened. James, she said quietly, we're heading straight toward a planet. James's eyes widened, and they were going too fast to stop. The escape pod shook violently as it hurtled toward the planet's surface. The control panel blared warnings in red, and James barely managed to stay in his seat as the force of their descent pressed him against the restraints. Valera's hands flew over the controls, trying to stabilize their descent. The engines are failing. We're coming in too fast. James clenched his jaw. Can you slow us down? Valera gritted her teeth. The thrusters are damaged, but I'll do what I can. The pod spun wildly, flames licking at its sides as it pierced through the planet's atmosphere. The outside turned red-hot from the intense heat of re-entry. James could see the planet below, a vast landscape of towering mountains, thick forests, and glimmering rivers. But they weren't heading for the soft ground. A massive rocky canyon stretched out beneath them, its jagged cliffs waiting like the jaws of a hungry beast. James's stomach twisted. We need a better landing spot. Valera's fingers gripped the controls tighter. Hold on. She yanked the pod's nose upward at the last second, barely steering them away from the canyon. But they were still falling too fast. The pod slammed through the treetops, branches snapping like bones as they crashed through the thick jungle. The impact was deafening. The world spun. Then, silence. James's eyes fluttered open. His whole body ached. He coughed, blinking against the smoke inside the pod. Sparks rained from the damaged control panel. Valera? He called out, his voice hoarse. A weak groan answered him. James turned and saw Valera slumped over in her seat, her silver-blue skin marked with scratches. Her breathing was slow but steady. Relief flooded him. She was alive. He reached over and touched her shoulder. Hey, wake up. Valera's glowing eyes flickered open. She winced, pressing a hand to her forehead. That was unpleasant. James let out a small chuckle. Yeah, no kidding. He unbuckled his harness and stood up, wobbling slightly. The crash had rattled every bone in his body. Valera sat up slowly, looking around at the ruined pod. Engines are dead. Communication system is fried. James sighed. So we're stuck. Valera exhaled. For now. James moved toward the pod's door. Then we should see where we landed. With a loud creak, he pushed the hatch open. A wave of fresh air hit him. Warm, humid, filled with strange scents. James stepped outside and froze. They had landed in the middle of a dense alien jungle. Massive trees, taller than skyscrapers, surrounded them. Their leaves glowed faintly, casting an eerie blue light. Strange creatures with shimmering scales slithered between the roots. In the distance, a river sparkled under the twin moons hanging in the sky. James whistled. Well, this is different. Valera joined him, scanning the surroundings. This planet wasn't on my star maps. We must be in uncharted territory. James frowned. That means no rescue. Valera nodded. Not unless we find a way to send a signal. Valera's hands moved swiftly across the panel, adjusting their trajectory. Escape pods are designed for emergency landings, not for outrunning warships. But I can make it difficult for them to catch us. The pod suddenly tilted sideways, making James grab the armrests. The stars outside spun wildly as Valera sent them into a sharp dive. Behind them, the warship fired a pulse of energy. A bright blue beam streaked past them, missing by inches. James clenched his jaw. That was close. Valera didn't respond. She was too focused. The small escape pod darted through space, zigzagging unpredictably. James watched the ship behind them. It was powerful, but it was large. Too large to turn as fast as their tiny pod. He suddenly had an idea. Can we fly into an asteroid field? Velera's eyes flickered toward him. That's insane. James shrugged. Do they want to destroy us or capture us? Velera hesitated, then understood. They won't risk chasing us through the debris. She quickly pulled up a star map and scanned the nearby sectors. Then her eyes lit up. There's a dense asteroid field not far from here. But the pod's shields are weak. We could get hit. James took a deep breath. It's better than getting caught. Velera nodded and punched in the coordinates. The pod lurched forward, speeding toward the distant asteroid field. Behind them, the warship fired again. A plasma blast streaked past them, close enough that the pod's metal frame rattled. James gritted his teeth. Faster. Velera pushed the engines to their limit. The asteroid field loomed ahead. A swirling mass of rocks tumbling through space. Some were as small as pebbles. Others were the size of mountains. James held his breath as they plunged into the chaos. Inside the asteroid field, everything became a deadly game of reflexes. Velera gripped the controls tightly, weaving between the giant floating rocks. The pod spun and twisted, barely avoiding collisions. James watched the warship behind them. It hesitated at the edge of the field. The massive vessel couldn't maneuver as easily through the dangerous terrain. They're slowing down, James said. Velera didn't answer. She was too focused. A massive asteroid spun toward them. Left, James shouted. Velera jerked the controls, and the pod rolled sharply, narrowly avoiding the rock. It scraped against the side, making the whole ship shudder. Damage? James asked. Velera checked the readings. Shields are weak, but we're still flying. James exhaled. Good. Now let's. Before he could finish, an alarm blared. James turned to the screen and saw a smaller ship detach from the warship. His stomach dropped. They sent a scout ship after us. Velera's hands tightened. It's faster than us. James's mind raced. They had to do something. Then he saw it. Ahead, a cluster of asteroids was moving in a spiral pattern, creating a temporary tunnel of space between them. If they timed it just right. James pointed. Go through there. Velera's eyes widened. That's crazy. James grinned. So is getting caught. Velera hesitated for only a second before pushing the engines to full power. The pod shot forward, heading straight for the narrow opening. Behind them, the enemy scout ship closed the distance. James clenched his fists. Come on. Come on. The human wasn't leaving. Worse, he wasn't afraid. He was curious. This was bad. Humans were unpredictable, and this one was smart. If she made one more mistake, he would see her completely. She had to disappear before the colony found out. Carefully, she moved toward the exit. But the human was watching now, scanning the air. He was waiting for her to move. Her mind raced for a solution. If she ran, he would chase her. If she attacked, she would break the treaty her people had sworn to uphold. She had one option left. Slowly, she reached for the emergency beacon on her wrist. If she activated it, her people would come for her. She didn't want to do this. She had spent too much time among humans, seen too much. They weren't the monsters her leaders believed them to be. But now, she had no choice. She pressed the button. A silent signal was sent into the stars. And for the first time, humanity was no longer alone on Vega 3. James Carter stared at the empty corridor, his mind racing. He had seen something, someone, a shimmering outline, a presence he could feel but not fully see. It wasn't his imagination. He was sure of it. He took a deep breath and ran a hand through his short brown hair. His instincts told him one thing. This wasn't human technology. Something else was at work here. James looked around carefully, scanning for any sign of movement. The air was still, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. Whoever, or whatever, was there had managed to disappear again, but not before he caught a glimpse of them. And that changed everything. Velera's heart pounded inside her chest. She had sent the distress signal. Now she had only minutes before her people responded. They would extract her, erase any evidence of her existence, and possibly even remove the human who had seen too much. She clenched her fists. She didn't want that. For months, she had lived in the shadows of this human colony, watching them, studying them. She had seen their kindness, their curiosity, and more than anything, their resilience. Humans weren't the ruthless conquerors her people feared. And this one, the one who had touched her, was different. He wasn't afraid. She had to make a decision. Did she run, or did she reveal herself? Her cloaking suit was damaged. Another pulse from his scanner would expose her fully. She had to act fast. Taking a deep breath, Veldera stepped back into the shadows, moving slowly, carefully. If she could just make it to the airlock, she could escape before her people arrived. But then, the human moved. James wasn't going to let this go. His heart pounded as he pulled a small tracking device from his belt. If something was in this corridor, something invisible, maybe he couldn't see it, but he could still track it. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed the device forward. It landed silently on the metal floor. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a single step. The device blinked red. James's eyes widened. There was something moving, right in front of him. "Got you," he muttered under his breath. Then he lunged. Veldera gasped as the human moved with unnatural speed. Before she could react, she felt his hand brush against her arm. Her cloaking field flickered violently, struggling to stay active. She twisted away, trying to escape, but it was too late. The field collapsed. James stumbled back as a figure materialized in front of him. For the first time, he saw her clearly. She was tall, slender, and undeniably alien. Her skin had a soft, silver-blue hue, and her large, luminous eyes held a mixture of shock and fear. She wore a tight, form-fitting suit with intricate glowing patterns running along her arms and legs. James's breath caught in his throat. They turned a sharp corner, only to stop abruptly. Two armored aliens blocked their path. James barely had time to react before one of the aliens raised a glowing device. Veldera grabbed his arm and yanked him backward just as a pulse of blue energy shot past them, sizzling against the metal wall. James pulled a small multi-tool from his pocket, the only weapon he had. "What now?" he muttered. Veldera's glowing eyes darted around the hallway, searching for an option. "Follow me." She suddenly ran straight toward the wall. For a second, James thought she had lost her mind, but then he saw it. A small ventilation hatch just above the floor. Veldera dropped to her knees and punched a code into the hatch's control panel. It hissed open. Inside now. James didn't argue. He dived into the narrow tunnel, feeling Veldera squeeze in behind him. The moment she was inside, she pressed another button, sealing the hatch behind them. Outside, the muffled shouts of the armored aliens rang through the hallway. Veldera exhaled. That won't hold them for long. James crawled forward, barely fitting inside the vent. The metal was cold and tight, forcing him to move slowly. Where does this lead? The launch bay. James clenched his jaw. They were so close. They reached the end of the tunnel. Veldera placed her hand against the exit panel, and the hatch slid open silently. James climbed out first, landing in a large open chamber. Bright lights flickered above, illuminating rows of small, sleek escape pods. James felt a rush of relief. They had made it. Veldera stepped beside him. There, she pointed to one of the pods. "That one is unlocked." James didn't waste a second. He sprinted toward it, but just as he reached the door, an alarm blared throughout the bay. Veldera's face darkened. "They know we're here." James turned to her. "Can you override the launch controls?" Veldera hesitated. "Yes, but it'll take time." James glanced at the entrance to the bay. They didn't have time. "Do it," he said firmly. "I'll buy us a few seconds." Veldera hesitated, then nodded and rushed to the pod's control panel. James grabbed a metal rod lying nearby and moved toward the entrance. If the aliens stormed in before they launched, they'd be trapped. His instincts were right. The doors slid open with a hiss, and 3 armored aliens stepped inside. Their glowing visors locked onto James immediately. "Stand down, human," one of them ordered. James took a deep breath. He had no chance in a fight, but he didn't need to win, just stall them. He smirked. "Sorry, but I've got a ship to catch." The lead alien raised a weapon, but James was faster. He grabbed a metal crate from the floor and hurled it at them. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make them flinch. "James, now," Vel-Era shouted. He spun around and sprinted toward the pod. Vel-Era was already inside, the doors sliding shut behind her. James leaped in just in time. The aliens fired their weapons, but the pod's reinforced doors sealed shut before they could hit him. Vel-Era's hands flew across the controls. "Hold on." James barely had time to buckle himself in before the pod launched into space. The sudden force pressed James against his seat as the pod shot away from the station. The alarms faded into silence, replaced by the deep blackness of space. James exhaled shakily. "We actually made it." Vel-Era nodded, but she didn't look relieved. James frowned. "What now?" Vel-Era's glowing eyes flickered with worry. "They won't let us escape that easily." As if to prove her point, the pod's warning system suddenly blared. James turned to the screen, and his stomach dropped. A large alien warship was following them. The escape pod shuddered as it rocketed through the vast emptiness of space. James gripped the sides of his seat, watching the blinking red warning lights flash across the control panel. Vel-Era's fingers danced over the controls. "They're gaining on us," she said, her voice tight with urgency. James turned to the small screen beside him. A massive alien warship loomed behind them, its dark hull gleaming under the distant stars. It wasn't just following them, it was hunting them. James swallowed hard. "What can we do?" Vel-Era's glowing eyes narrowed. "We need to outmaneuver them." James frowned. "Can this thing even do that?"